Dear friends and colleagues, I'm so sorry I'm not with you at the gala this evening. By a fluke of scheduling, it turns out that tonight is also the 30th anniversary celebration of the Institute on Community Integration at the University of Minnesota. 30 years ago, a few programs at the university on the topic of disability were joined together under the umbrella of the Institute on Community Integration, and we received funding as a university center on excellence in developmental disabilities from the Administration on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. And tonight is a homecoming of the more than 300 people who have worked as staff and students at ICI. And I felt it was imperative that I be there for that event. I know I'm missing a remarkable evening with remarkable people who have made a remarkable organization doing important things related to an important cause. And I really can't adequately express how gratified I am that you consider me an ally in all that you do. 45 years ago, when I entered the disability field, if somebody would have asked me where in 45 years I might hope to be and what I might hope to be considered, I really might have said, it'd be nice if people considered me an expert. But I can tell you today that there's no better feeling to have people involved in the disability movement consider me an ally. And so thank you very, very much for this. 45 years ago when I entered the field, Leo Kanner was mandatory reading. People thought of autism as a rare form of childhood schizophrenia. The role of mothers and its cause was still suspect. 45 years ago, there was no home and community-based services program in Medicaid. There wasn't even yet a certified intermediate care facility for people with developmental disabilities. There was no entitlement to special education for students with disabilities. There was no supplemental security income program. There was no Rehabilitation Act yet, with its promise that disability was part of the human condition, and therefore discrimination against people with disabilities was not to be tolerated. No courts had yet expressed their abhorrence and required reformation of the horrible conditions in state institutions. When I came into the field, we were still 20 years away from the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the Olmstead decision was even further away. So it does seem a long time. One thing that had happened that was so incredibly important was that Ed Roberts had declared that he was tired of well-meaning non-cripples directing his life and his future. And he called for, in his words, cripples to take over the management of services and to take over leadership in the field. And he referred to that in the terminology of the day, cripple power. Today, more than cripple power, it's power to all people who self-identify as members of a group with people with disabilities, including those who identify themselves on the autism spectrum. So you're really part of a remarkable movement, and again, I can't think of any nicer feeling than for you to consider me an ally in that movement. I really respect so greatly the efforts and successes of ASAN. You've stood tall for dignity, respect, self-determination, and you've stood tall in the face of well-organized, well-funded, well-connected agendas of others who have a different vision. You've battled stereotypes, even stereotypes that have been promoted by people who've called themselves advocates for people with disabilities. And through your demands to be at the table, you've really reset that table for people with disabilities. I think particularly of the involvement of ASAN in the redesign of the standards for Medicaid home and community-based services. There have been major reforms in those services, and your role in it was huge. And because of that, over 1.5 million people today have access to services that are better aligned with their aspirations. So I've had a lot of time over the years to meet privately and in groups with your executive director, Ari Naaman. I've always found that interesting. He's shown great leadership in shaping your organization. I really have enjoyed working with Ari in terms of providing data, but also in terms of his frequent requests for advice. I think sometimes that advice is, he asks for advice just to keep me on the hook, so I'll provide him data the next time he asks. But at any rate, I've watched him closely at meetings in Washington, around the country, with the National Council on Disability, with the National Quality Forum, with the Interagency Autism Coordinating Committee, and elsewhere. He has represented you so very well in a substantive, in a well-prepared, and an exceptionally effective way. He's become a very powerful voice in Washington. So one more time, I hope you realize how deeply I appreciate this recognition. I'll stop now and get out of the way so you can have a joyful evening. I do wish I could be there tonight to wish you all personally the very best as you continue your important work. Thank you.